educated. Tara Westover. Okay, the premise of this novel, she is I think she's like the 7th child or something. Youngest, I want to say. She comes from a Mormon fundamentalist, survivalist family, and her family, at birth, Tara was not issued a birth certificate because they have a serious mistrust of government institutions, and they basically want to live off the grid completely. So because of that, she did not go to public school. She never went to like a doctor or a hospital, and she doesn't have any government identification. And she's raised to believe in these very extremist views that I don't even think Mormons believe in the shit that they talk about. No, it's like super extreme.
It's like riddled with like, well, we'll get into it, but like mental health and like just very extremist of like what different mental illnesses can, like the effect of that on a family and how that can like bring you, like how psychosis can affect. It's a whole
totally
jumble.
Yes, the father, he believes himself to be a prophet or something, and he thinks that like it's the end of the world, and he's preparing for it to be the end of the world.
Yes.
And meanwhile, his wife, or Tara's mother, is like a midwife and also this herbal healer.
Yeah.
The father has this scrap junkyard that the children go and work in with like no safety gear, and they get, so many of them get injured.
Yeah, like really serious injuries.
Seriously injured, where they should have gone to the hospital, but they don't, because they don't believe in the hospital.
Yeah.
And so they have these really fucked up like remedies that they give them.
As an aside for that too, like each time they survive one of these like really massive injuries, they think it's a sign from God.
Totally.
That like if God didn't have their back, that they wouldn't survive.
Yes.
And I think that, I think the reason I find this book so interesting is because it's, well, firstly, it's real life. Yeah. And like real life is so messy.
Crazy to imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it really, like their circumstances are this like crazy mix of like religion, mental health struggles, like domestic violence, just like also feminism in the sense of like how Tara Westover's mom had succumbed to the needs and the kind of outbursts that her father had, even though there's so many moments in the book where I think Tara herself believes that her mom is and was a strong woman with her own opinions, but has her own reasons for kind of just letting her dad rule. And like and that theme continues like with her sister, and it's super interesting to follow her story of the actions she takes to actively leave that world, but also how that world never really leaves her.
So well said.
Oh, thank you.
I loved that.
Thank you.
It's not an in-your-face feminist text, like by any means, and I think a lot of people can relate, but it's all, like it is a feminist text because the resilience and sort of the sense in which she had to really make her own way is like, you know, that's feminism, like being strong in the face of adversity, like not having things like given to you. You know, her pursuing an actual formal education was probably seen as an act of defiance and rebellion against her family. But I didn't even see it that way. I just saw her as being like wanting to better herself, not as purposely like trying to defy her family. But anyway, she goes and pursues like college degree, and then she goes to Cambridge for a PhD in history, and the fact that she ends up there is like,
and she gets a lot of like visiting like fellowships, like she gets a lot of awards. But I think what's interesting as well in that note of feminism is like one thing she clearly writes in the book, or something that stood out to me at least. I think it's interesting to see what stands out to each person, and like the two things that really stood out to me are like one, her feminist traits, and two, like the stuff about domestic violence. I thought was very interesting in how they just like totally brush it under the rug, and like the way that they use religion to cover it up, which like is a really controversial thing, and like whatever, that's its own big topic, but it is a big theme in the book too. how she deals with the domestic violence after the fact and how she convinces herself that it was her fault, like, which is so classic.
Like Kara does.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and just like with her, the violence with her brother, how she like looks for faults in her own behavior and like needs external. Yeah, and the fact that like he extended that abuse not just to her but to his wife, his wife and his girlfriends.
You're mine because you read it.
I read it so recently.
I didn't read it recently, but now that she's mentioning it, I'm remembering.
Yeah, but the one thing she does mention, like Tara, actually there was like maybe a paragraph or a chapter about this, I forget, but she writes about how she asked like one of the guys, like a new male friend that she had, I think in the first like community college that she went to or whatever, about how like if he was a girl would he still pursue the same academic pursuits, and he said like no, and that fit with her mindset of like women should be at home, and so it took a long time for her to kind of move out of that and recognize that she was allowed to pursue an education and allowed to pursue things outside of the home, and not only that like it wasn't shameful. Like it was one thing to allow herself to do it, but it was another thing to be like, no, this is still worthy of like my time and my self-esteem. And I think that was huge, like to me at least, that felt like a really defining moment of like for her being like, I'm allowed to go to school and I'm allowed to be educated and I'm allowed to like be badass. How to get to that place of feeling like her voice matters. And even at the end, I can't say that I felt like she was fully confident in her voice mattering.
Right.
But she just like, she was confident.
And she might never be.
She might never be.
Given her situation and where she comes from, like we all come from unique situations, right? And to me, it's like the fact that she was able to navigate a world that was not there for her at all. She's like, oh, there's no door for me.
No
like,
door.
It was like she had to, through her own wherewithal, like do this. If you're resilient, if you know what you want, if you're not willing, if you're willing to go through the hard work and like, you know, experience that, then you can get there. And it's like she did, and it came at a cost because
100%. Like, she lost a lot of her family.
She lost a lot of her family, and what I really appreciated about the book was that she doesn't it's like I don't feel like she's writing about these characters with resentment necessarily.
No, I totally agree with that.
And also, not even just that, but I also don't feel like she's trying to get sympathy from her readers.
No.
Which I really appreciate, because she could.
Which is complicated.
Because she could, yeah. Because there was this other memoir I read, like, and it was huge. It's like Jeanette Wallace or something.
Oh, I've read hers, Glass Castle.
Yes, and I felt like I couldn't get through it because I felt like she was trying to make us all
like
sad for her. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm not like sitting here gonna be sad for you. Like that turns me off. But I didn't get that sense whatsoever. And that's a hard balance to kind of get.
I think it's because she did a really good job of portraying the confidence that her family members had in their lifestyle. Like she wasn't like, oh, I look down on them because they choose not to do X, Y, Z. It was more like that was their choice and they're happy with it and it brings them joy. It's not suitable for me. And then she leaves it to the reader, at least in my opinion, she leaves it to the reader to decide like how screwed up that situation is. Like she doesn't blatantly.
So true. So true.
The only thing I would say
just reports what's the
exactly.
situation.
She does. She has a very journalistic approach to it. I'd say the only thing maybe that she has more of an opinion on is the domestic violence with her brother. But the interesting thing is you follow her journey in realizing she has an opinion. Yeah. Which makes it less of like fishing for like sadness, because she starts off being like I said, like blaming herself, and then she really documents how she gets to the point of being like, no, because that really, to me, that stood out as like what really pulled her away from her family. Well, it like not only was this violence occurring, but it wasn't, there was nothing happening when she would really talk about it. Like it was like ignored. And or justified. Yes. If someone's writing a memoir, it means they're like either they're freaking Michelle Obama or their life wasn't great.
Becoming.
I'm reading that right now.
Are you reading it now?
Yeah.
Is it good?
I've only read like the first chapter. I mean, I love Michelle Obama, obviously, too. So I'm gonna love it no matter what.
I don't like Michelle.
Actually,
she's like not really for me.
She's not really my type.
Mormons are raised differently. They're like a very specific.
I don't know if anyone is raised like that. No,
they're like on the fringes, and I mean, this is a thing. There are American stories and lives where people in the States are in cults and like on the edges of society, and this still happens, you know, and there are still these really crazy stories, but they're few and far between, I think.
Yes, I would say so as well.
Yeah, and she is one of them.
At the very beginning of the book, she talks about this other family who also doesn't subscribe to like the government.
With that the shooting happened?
Yes, yeah. So like her dad tells her about this.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
This family, I forget what their names are. This family who also like doesn't go to school, doesn't have IDs, whatever.
But this was in the news. I'll link it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was like a real thing.
Yeah.
And then there was a shooting and like whatever. Her dad essentially frames it as like they got shot and died because they didn't subscribe to the government and institutions.
Yes.
And then like
in reality, you learn later
that it was something else. That it was I forget exactly.
Well, I think they were harming. The reality was, and I think this is like a big takeaway from the book, is that they like the father, right, through his own lens, created some version of reality that made sense to him.
Yes.
It was like a gaslighting fucking situation.
Yes.
And I think that's like a really good point that you raised, because I do remember that, and I remember reading it later where she actually describes how it in fact happened.
Yeah.
Or at least how the news saw it happen.
Yes.
Right? So we don't even know, maybe that's not the true story.
Exactly. But she comes across that information.
Yeah, exactly. And so she's kind of there, it's kind of like, this was my dad's version, and this was the other version. And so there are two sides to every story.
I think one of the reasons it's called Educated is not because she became educated. It's because, well, I think
she had to fight for that.
She had to fight for her education for sure, but also like her dad did make an active effort to educate her, but it was like through his lens.
Yes.
The mom had a lot of influence on Tara as well, but she writes her in a way of like not taking up space, like intentionally not taking up space.
Yeah. I found the mom to be like such a subtly impressive person.
Yes.
Because I remember reading when she was starting the midwifery thing, and she hated it, and it would cause her so much anxiety, but she still did it.
She still did it,
and she stuck through. Another kind of interesting thing about the outcome of the novel is that, so this family, they have I think like 7 kids or something like that.
Yeah, like a lot
of kids.
Children.
And they all end up in pretty like I think a few of them end up in like our standards pretty well.
Yeah.
But then a
like
of them, it's either
like,
one or the other.
Yeah.
It was like a couple of them ended up being educated, having like degrees and like,
families.
and like professional careers.
Yeah.
And the other end was like kind of still in
that bubble.
Yeah. But it was like, because I remember her sister is like living in a trailer park or something like that. But I didn't feel like she was judging them. The end of it is kind of like, she still does want a relationship, but she also knows that for her to be like healthy and okay, she needs to
have distance. You have to have people that believe in you, because you can't do it on your own.
No.
And like she didn't have a family that kind of supported her in that way other than her brother, but she found her own community and she was open to their advice, which I found really interesting. It's also interesting, I think, that like because you read it 6 months ago or like however long ago, like the story that you took from it.
She has a fresh perspective. I have a bit of an aged perspective. I would still say it's probably one of my favorite reads of the year so far. Like I'll put it in top 5. Not gonna put it in top 3 yet.
Yeah, you don't know what's to come.
Yeah, like I think I can say top 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we should do this again with a different book.
I think so too.
Like this is so fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the next book I should read?
I don't know. We need to. Well, we should we can decide together.
We're like third take. I actually don't know.
Second take of this clip. So Britt's gonna be back. I loved having her here on my channel. Novel idea. Yeah. She enjoys reading feminist stuff. I do too, but I haven't delved into that so much. But I think next we might do an actual fiction. So that was a memoir. She's gonna dive into some fiction with me.
I will.
Is that comfortable for you?
Okay. Well, and I think fiction, I think fantasy.
No, do not think of that.
I think that's my issue, is I need to be introduced to more fiction that kind of resembles life a bit.
Okay, I'm going to get you this book. I will buy it for you.
You don't have to buy me books.
No,
I will gladly borrow and return.
We're going to figure it out. I thought that was a really great book talk.
I thought so too.
And I had a lot of fun. Yes. So thank you for tuning in. She'll be back. Please subscribe, comment down below, and I'll see you in the next one.
Sounds good.